Record the computer. It says recording right here. Yeah.
Oh, it's recording. Okay.
Well, it's one button, Dad. Come on. Have fun.
There we go.
Yes.
Okay. So, Dr. Tracey Jones, how are you today?
I'm tremendous, John Solider. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Much better now. Technology.
What can you do? Right.
Not all is our friend, right? But anyway.
You got that right. You got that right.
So, Tracey, you've had such an amazing life. I have such tremendous respect for so many of the things that you've done, but let's go through just a couple of them so our audience gets to know you better. I know you were raised, first of all, by one of the people who really influenced and created this self-development movement, as we know, the great Charlie Tremendous Jones, your dad. You want to tell us a little bit about him?
He was tremendous. He was a person that loved life, and he was so down to earth and real because he came from a really tough background. But he had this resiliency that just was infectious. And he was a salesman of just unsurpassed excellence. So he was this larger than life. He had that star quality. You know what I'm saying? And only sometimes you see stars, and then when you get close to them, you're like, ew, they have charisma, but they're not nice people. He was the real deal. What drew you into his orbit, it was like basking in the warmth of, the sun. And so he just really taught me growing up, it doesn't matter where you start, you read, you work hard, and you hang around great people, and you stay away from trash as friends, and don't read trash, and work hard, and he combined work and fun together. So it was a weird upbringing. I said we were like little guinea pigs. So he'd try all these crazy parenting things on us, like locking up all the TVs, taking them all away because we didn't need to watch that crap, which really is very progressive. You know what I'm saying? More parents should do that now. Exactly. And then our family vacations were, he'd pack us all up in an RV of various sizes. As he got more successful, they got bigger. But in the beginning, it was a Volkswagen pop-up camper with 6 of us, 2 adults and books, driving from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, all the way down to Mexico City, Mexico, doing his meetings all along the way and up. So yeah, those were our vacations. It was just different, and it was a lot of fun. But the greatest thing was, John, as a young child, I got exposed to sit under the tutelage of people like Zig Ziglar, Ken Blanchard, Og Mandino, Jim Rohn. I mean, just really sitting there as a little girl in the front row, just watching these people just touch people and show them that, you can live a great life. So that is probably the greatest thing that he could have exposed me to.
Wow. Yeah, needless to say, any of those people you just mentioned, I mean, what a classroom that would be, just to talk to any of those people.
Right. Right. And they were just so down to earth, and there was no pretentiousness, because we get to go hang out with them because they were Dad's friends. But, there was no, don't approach the table. They're sitting here. It was just very, hey, we're here. And they'd see people and they'd hug them and they'd laugh and share thoughts with them. And Dad would come eat dinner with us. It was all just so authentic and fluid and just beautiful.
Wow. That was great experiences, I'm sure. And then after that, you decided to go and serve your country. And I know you went to the United States Air Force Academy. Tell us about that a little bit.
Well, I did. Well, when you grow up with somebody that is a motivational speaker, it's you got to kind of carve out your own niche. You know what I'm saying? Sure. And he would always tell me, Tracey, you got to earn your stripes. You got to earn your stripes. And he wasn't military. He was a diehard patriot. But what he meant was, you can't live in my shadow. Every man, woman on this planet needs to go out and carve their own destiny. And so I was always very aware of this. And I thought, I know this is kind of weird, but to a teenager mind, I thought, you know what, where can I go where I earn my worth based on who I am? Not that I'm somebody's daughter. And I thought the military, because you can't even if you're Patton's son, you have to start as a
Mhm.
second lieutenant. There is
Mhm.
no jumping ahead. And, well, that's that's the boss's son. So now he's a vice president at, 22 with no experience, none of that. So I
Mhm.
went into the military. He also had gone down to Roswell, New Mexico. This is before there were aliens. And he went down there, the X-Files was down there. And he went down and shared at a New Mexico Military Institute, which was an Army junior college and high school.
Mm.
And he came back one day and he laid their pamphlets on the table and he said, Tracey, these kids are really going to make something with their lives. So that's all I needed. He would kind of challenge me, and I was like, that's why I was the guinea pig. I'm like, I'm game. I'll give it a shot. Why
Mm.
not? And so I applied and got in there, and I already had been at college, so I got my associate of arts there. And they're like, well, you graduated, what do you want to do next? And I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, well, we have West Point, it was an Army school, or Annapolis. And I'm like, I've heard of them. And then they said, well, then the Air Force Academy's in Colorado Springs. And I had fallen in love with the West.
Mm.
Like, I should have been a cowgirl. Dad had a lot of, he was always had us Western wear, Western gear. We were always out West, and Grand Canyon and Knott's Berry Farm. And just, he was a cowboy. And so I'm like, yeah, I want to stay out West. So
Wow.
that's how it happened.
Well, it's funny. I've been on all the campuses of all the academies, and by far the Air Force Academy is the most beautiful.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's if you like that charm. Now, my husband went to Annapolis, so he swears Annapolis is charming. But I grew up in the space era, watching the launch. Hearing
Mhm.
I always wanted to be an astronaut. I went to Epcot and saw Spaceship Earth and was like, oh, this is the world of the future. So when I saw the Air Force Academy, I was like, yeah, this is the
Yep.
place for me.
Yep. Yep. Very familiar with it. So you went in the Air Force, then you served. I mean, you were in Afghanistan.
First Gulf War. So this is before Afghanistan. So I got commissioned in 1988 and went in and worked on fighter jets,
Mm.
F-15s and F-16s, and went to the first Gulf War and then the Bosnian War. And I did 12 years. I didn't plan on staying in that long, but it was just such a wonderful experience, and living all over the world, the Middle East and Europe. And then at the 12-year point, I got out in 2000. And I thought, well, let's do something radically different. Because as I said, I'm kind of a guinea pig. So I'm like, let's just try something completely different. So I moved to Austin, Texas, and got into the booming semiconductor industry and lived
Mm.
there for 5 years as a project manager. And that was really cool. That was a lot of fun.
I bet. I bet. So then Dad gets sick and eventually passes away. But before he passes away, kind of made some decisions in terms of the business that he had spent his lifetime building. So share a little bit about what happened with that story.
Well, for those of you out there that are in any kind of a family business or second or third generation, and you're like, oh my gosh, we're not sure what's going to happen, I just want to give a word of peace to you. Neither did we. There was no real succession planning. I mean, my father set up a trust with nothing in it other than no debt and a vehicle to make money. There was property in it. So he appointed me and two of his friends as trustees. But other than that, the business was, something he had done, and it wasn't obvious. I had talked on and off throughout my life and his life about coming back, but it wasn't the right timing. Plus, we were very, very similar, and it wouldn't have been the right time for it, because how he approached things and how I would approach things, because he's a sales guy and I'm operations.
Mhm.
So anybody that's been in any kind of manufacturing, sales promise this, and we can't, we were where the rubber meets the road, and the sales guys are promising the world. So there's that beautiful tension.
Mhm.
So I just came back, and we'll talk about when we get to one of your principles, but I kept waiting for him to ask me if I was coming back, and he never asked me, John. And I said, finally, 2 days before he passed, I said, Dad, I'm going to come back. And it wasn't so much, John, as I left home at 17, so I knew he was big, but I didn't really know how big he was. And all I knew was that I respected, although I wasn't part of it as he was growing the business, I respected so much what he had done. I thought, I'm just going to take a hiatus from, I was in defense contracting in DC at that time, in St. Louis. And I said, I'm going to come back home. I'm just going to take a year, and I'm going to just make sure that everything that he has built is taken care of, because there wasn't really anybody to come in and pick it up. We had the trust, but that was it. And so I came back and just thought, I just want to make sure that what he has spent his whole life doing, because it was such a beautiful thing, either we find a way to keep it going, I find somebody to take the reins to the next generation, or I put a beautiful bow on it and say, that was fabulous. So here we are 12 years later. And, by the grace of God, and still trekking along with the tremendous legacy. And it's been really fun. The funnest part has been, though, like I said, I left home at 17. And so I knew of him. I didn't know that much about him. And, as much as I love and respect my dad now, when you're growing up with somebody, you're like, like Jesus at the temple, and they're like, isn't that little Joseph's son? Who's going to listen to him,
Yeah.
And so a prophet is never appreciated in his land or by his own family. And so I was like, oh my gosh. So the great joy has been really getting to know him. And I look forward to an eternity of spending it with him and really sharing the things that I got to pick up and run with.
Wow. Well, yeah, it was a tremendous foundation, no doubt. But I think I'm experiencing a little bit of that on my end, even with my own kids. Like, they have no idea what dad does for a living. He's like, he just sells something, and he's in he writes some books once in a while. And, he doesn't know who'd go to him for advice. It's like, a lot of people, except my kids. So
well, that's good.
I get it.
I love that. For your listeners out there, take time and ask your parents what they do, and really listen to them. My dad was a genius, and I knew he was kooky, and I knew he was fun. He was a genius, and I missed so much. I get to find it now because we have books, but I kick myself, and God redeems everything, and I know where he is, and I'm going to get to see him again. And we're all knuckleheads, growing up. But for the listeners out there, if you're blessed enough to still have your parents around, find out what they do. You might be pretty impressed.
Well, you know what? Exactly. And so dad passes away. You have this business that you really know nothing about at that point. It certainly
didn't even know the books. I didn't.
Certainly all this great military training and everything else, and been all over the world. And all of a sudden it's like, come back to Pennsylvania and run a business that you don't really have an interest in at that point. But okay, well, it's dad's legacy. And like you said, I can wrap this up, but all of a sudden you realize the value, because I was a customer of your father. That's how I knew your father. Okay. And a lot of us in the network marketing world, we all knew Charlie Tremendous Jones, maybe not even personally, but we all were customers of the company because he gave such great value with so many great titles and authors. So we all knew the company, and we were all, buying product from it on a regular basis. So I guess you kind of figured out pretty quick, like, wait a minute, this is much more than just a business. This has some real social value and business value to a lot of people.
And John, you hit the nail on the head. When you're working, and my dad used to say this to me, Tracey, you can work for somebody else or you can work for yourself. But as long as you work for somebody else, you're always going to hit the wall where you go, this is it. I mean, there's so much more I could be doing, but it's not your company. So you can only take it so far. And so I was in like 5 different industries, living all over the world. And I'm like, Dad, this is it. This is it. This is it. This is it. And then a year later, I'm like, oh, dear God, it's the same poop, different day, the old saying. And he's like, he didn't say, I told you so, but he's like, yeah, I mean, you're working for somebody else's dream. The other thing was, though, John, I'm an engineer by nature, so I'm very analytical. And I always thought I was very dichotomous. I'm like, they're the sales network marketing people, and then there's the facts process people, and ne'er the two shall meet, not realizing, whatever, just so dumb on my part to assume that they couldn't be blended. So that was where I finally just thought, you know what? I was so burnt out to 20 years of working for wonderful, huge defense of country, changing the world through technology, our national security. These are great things. And I was so burnt out from bad leadership, just not having my heart in things and wondering, when I meet my maker, am I really going to say I built $4 million of chip making? I just felt so unfulfilled. And so I came back home and was like, this is my only option. And it was a beautiful thing to then see it and go, now I get to do stuff that really has eternal value.
Wow. Wow. So that was 12 years already. It's amazing. And then, we met now, it's probably about 4 years ago. And you had published our book, Moving Up 2020, which we published in 2019, and we started working on retooling it in 2018. And I think that's about when we started to talk on a regular basis and became friends and all of that. And so I'm really happy from a personal standpoint that you decided to go this course and continue your dad's legacy with the business. I know a lot of other people are as well. You've blessed a lot of people with not only his legacy, but your own, because you've created your own in our industry of direct selling or network marketing or multi-level or whatever you want to call it, self-development at the end of the day. But so many other people use self-development books. But let's talk about that a little bit, because our recent book, Leave Nothing to Chance, it's kind of getting a life of its own. It's really interesting. You put these things together, as you well know from all the books you've authored that we'll talk about in a moment as well. But in that book, when you first read our script, which one of the principles kind of grabbed you?
Well, I'm looking at them right now. Well, the first thing that grabbed me, and for those of you that haven't read the book, the story of John and Foster, and you got to trust somebody, and you got to know there's a value congruence there. So I knew of you. I didn't know nearly as much about Foster, but to understand where you guys were, where your convictions and values were, I was like, respect to my peeps. It was so wonderful. So that's the first part of it. But and there's really two that kind of go hand in hand, and for different reasons. The first one to me was principle 2, listen to your reason. It's the heart of the matter. And one of the reasons when I finally realized why my father never asked me to come take over the business was he knew it had to be my decision. And what else would a daughter on his deathbed, if a father asks a child, would you come back and run the business? Of course they're going to say yes, even if they don't feel it. Okay. But he didn't tell me that because he knew I had to be the one. My heart had to be in it. And so when I came to him 2 days before he emigrated to heaven and I said, hey, I'm going to come back, he just squeezed my hand and he whispered, because he couldn't talk anymore. And he said, I know you'll take it places I never could have gone. And that was it. That was the handoff, the whole handoff, the holy handoff. And so one of those things was he knew, running your own show is great, but you're dealing with people and it's life on earth. So there's always going to be problems. And I think he knew that as I got into all the intricacies of running an existing second generation family business or in a field that really I was unfamiliar with, he knew there'd be days where I'd question it. But as long as he knew it was my decision to come back and do this, I would always go, all right, I may want to quit, but I'm not going to quit, because I made this commitment. My heart is in it. So I really think for anybody out there, when you go all into something, you're unstoppable. You're so single-minded of purpose and mindset, and it takes time. And and like I said, in the beginning, I just did it because I was very fiercely loyal, my father's reputation and brand. And so I did it more to kind of put a hedge of protection around it. But then I really realized, no, that it's more than that. I have to be completely all in with this personal development industry, or I can't do it. So I think once your heart's in it, you're unstoppable. You don't care about no's. You wake up, like you said, you hit the ground running in the morning. You wake up in the middle of the night because you get some great ideas, because you're all in. And if you don't see value in it, it won't last. If you're doing this because your friend told you, hey, you need another means of income, or hey, you need to do this, or you pivot with purpose, not out of pain, because when you pivot on purpose, that's when it sticks. So that's my number one thing. But the second one is really as important, is principle 9, showing love for others, because the Bible clearly says, What's the first greatest commandment? Love the Lord with all your heart, mind, and soul, and then love others. And so you're in a field where you're recruiting people to promote a product. You're selling. But when you realize that you love people and you love giving them freedom and you love restoring health to them, you're not selling them anything. It's that you care so much about them. It's like the gospel. You can't but help telling them about it. And I think with personal development, even with publishing, John, even talking to you, when I hear some people's messages like yours, I just love it so much. And I look and see this message needs to get out of people and to other people, because and it's not about, well, if I sign this many authors and I make this much money, I can live on. No. It's about our love for getting wonderful transformational messages out to humanity. So I'd say the two of them is knowing your focus, and then you got to have love, because even if you have your focus, it's a tough world out there, and there are some mean people and nasty people along the way you're going to meet, and not to mention the crap you get from being in certain industries, and you're this and that, and people second guessing you and judging you. Without love, you get pretty hardened.
That's right. That's right. Well, you go back to, Paul's words to the Corinthians, right? It's, that's the most important thing. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes in business, hey, there are days and there are people and there are circumstances. So let's talk about that a little bit more. I mean, you grew up around books, obviously. Go back in time. What was the first book that really grabbed the young Tracey and said, okay, let me read this. Let me reread it. Let me mark it up because it's that valuable. What was the first one?
Well, we always read up. So I can remember there's a couple books I clearly remember reading. I read, and my dad was always like, hey, you need to read biographies or personal development, even as a kid. Now, he did let us touch some fiction, and I'm going to hit on one of those books. But the one thing I really loved was Hind's Feet on High Places, which is kind of very Pilgrim's Progress-ish.
Okay.
So it was all about Little Much Afraid, and it's a metaphor about going through life and the bad things that can happen, but that, we have our Heavenly Father. So that was really a beautiful parable that as a young child and as a young Christian, it let me know, okay, in life, you're going to go through certain hurdles. There's going to be bad things that happen, but it's all par for the course and you are protected. So that was very important for me, and why I was very non-risk averse, why I would go to war, why I'm, the first to volunteer for anything, because I'm like, hey, we only have one life. And if this life gets extinguished, and it does for all of us, then we transition over to eternal life and perfect bodies. And, I get to be the astronaut I always wanted to be. So that was one of them. Pilgrim's Progress was pivotal. Power Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale, with his whole concept of, hey, if you're made in God's image, how can you? And so I was always like, hey, even if I feel like having a bad attitude, I'm made in God's image. How can I be down? So that was a really big one. The other one was, and I know you're going to laugh, Maxwell Maltz's Psycho-Cybernetics. I read that as a kid. Pivotal. And for those of you that don't know him, he was a plastic surgeon, cosmetic surgeon for 40 years, and finally realized you can't fix people from the outside in. You can only fix people from the inside out, which today would be pure heresy, And so that really taught me it's all about in here. So all these, and then the other one, my other favorite author as a kid was C.S. Lewis, still is. But I read his space trilogy, the first one, Out of the Silent Planet, which was profound for me because it had such religious a symbolism in it. And what it really taught me, for those of you that read it, is the silent planet is Earth. And the whole rest of the heavens, there was only one begotten son. So that means there's only one planet that fell, and we're living on it, kind of thing. And so I just thought that was so cool that, we have this God that created the whole universe, and we know what happened in our space, and we know it's just temporary. We already read Revelation 21 to 22. We know how this is going to end. But that was also really cool to help me realize that, I think you have to understand the nature of man, of fallen man, because otherwise you go through life and you you can't wrap your head around some of the things that go on, and you can't truly love people because the only way we're capable of doing that is through Christ. So those were the books really early on that, so a lot of parables, a lot of allegories, deeply religious theological themes about God, Christ laying down his life for us, and that no matter what we were going through, we always had him around us and advocating for us. So that was pretty big as a child coming up.
That's quite a reading list, to say the least. And Lewis had a big impact on me too, and so did Peele, for that matter, because the first book I ever read, not the first book I ever read, the first book I ever read on self-development was Dr. Peele. And ironically, I was in the hospital in New York, about 12 blocks from the Crystal, what was it called? The Crystal Collegiate Marble Church, I think it was the name of his church. And we actually went one Sunday, and we actually got to hear him preach. And I was 17 at the time, and he was an old man then. But his words, and I'll never forget this, Tracey, is one of the things he has in that book is, if you think you have problems, go stand outside the local funeral home or nursing home. And it's like, yeah, okay, you kind of put it in perspective and work backwards from there. Whatever problem you have, as long as you're, upright, you're probably going to solve it. So yeah, we have a lot in common as far as that. And Lewis, of course, Lewis's statement about the fact that we read to know we're not alone.
Yes.
Wow. I mean, for everything you do for a living and I do for a living, and we're trying to get people to read. All leaders are readers. So let's talk about that a little bit. You made a decision a few years ago, after all this vast education, life experience, right? With a business to run every single day, to go back to school and get another degree in leadership. So let's talk about that a little bit. Where did you do that? And tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. Well, in 2015, I made the decision to go back and earn my PhD in leadership through Lancaster Bible College. And I had been on the board of Lancaster Bible College since I came back home in 2009. And Lancaster, Pennsylvania is where my parents met. So my father was born in Alabama. My mom's she's Mennonite, from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And so they met. So Lancaster was always just a beautiful space, because that's where my parents met each other. My older brothers and sisters were born. So I was on the board, and I knew they were rolling out a PhD program. And one of the things I had always wanted, John, since I was a little girl, was a PhD. And so as I came back, I don't know why, there were times where I almost flunked out of school because I didn't see the value in it, kind of thing. I'm a much better student now, obviously. But I just started thinking, you know what? If I'm going to be writing on leadership and speaking on leadership, I noticed a lot of people in the audience had PhDs. And I thought, if I'm going to be a subject matter expert, I really should earn the terminal degree. So I did. I went back and started in 2015. And the other thing was, John, I had been back running the business for about 6 years. And I was so just confused as to what I was supposed to be doing. And I just didn't feel like I was getting any traction. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to take this time and I'm going to go back to school. And I did the same thing back in 2004 to 2006 when I got my MBA. That's when tech was booming, and then it really sunk, and then it would boom and it was sunk. So during one of the sinking times, I'm like, I'm going back to school. So I just thought, I don't know where to go in the future, but I do know right now I'm going to invest in my learning, and I want the PhD. I want that credibility. I want to put the mental grit. I want to go through the process. And so I earned it, back in 2019 in leadership, and got to really dive in and study something that was really deeply, very, very interesting to me, which is followership.
It's interesting too, because, certainly with the military background and the father that you had and the mother that you had and the upbringing that you had, you were around leadership constantly. Sometimes maybe forced, but at the end of the day, you were around leadership. And then it's interesting to probably go and study it and go, wow, give me a one of those, Saul of Tarsus moments where you're going like, wow, like oh yeah, okay, hey, I lived that already. Now I'm learning about it, but I actually lived it. Give me one of those.
Okay, here's the biggest thing. So I'm about 3 years into it and I'm studying it and I love it. I love it. And I love hearing the theory behind leadership. Okay. Because theory is built on grounded research. It's not just pie in the sky. To write your PhD, you have to actually go out and study something. You just can't talk about it and say, well, this person said this. Opinions don't matter in dissertations. Everything must be cited and grounded. So one of the things before I even started that, I realized, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks, there is a world of difference between being a leader and engaging in leadership. And it just, I know for those of you out there, you may be like, how could you not know that? I was so used to just running my own self as my own ship, but that's not what leadership is about. You know what I'm saying? And so I had my stuff squared away and I was conscientious and I was a good leader, but I didn't really understand the process of leadership, which is not about my skill set, but really honing in on who are the best people that I need. If I'm captain of the ship, I have to make sure that I recruit and train and correct and rebuke, the people to be on the team. So that was pivotal for me. And I'm like, I finally get it. Because every time I would hear about leadership, I would put it in my lens about how I would process it. And it doesn't matter. I am just a leader. And we all have to be at least a leader of our own selves. Okay. So we're all leaders. But leadership is you're on the ship of a ton of leaders. You know what I'm saying? You've got all these other people. And so you have to act as a cohesive organizational citizenship where it's no longer about any one person, but about this collective. And I was like, I mean, it just really hit me. And then I felt bad for a little because I thought, how stupid and how wrong have I been? But you know what? I did the best I could. And we're all works in progress. And so it was just very, very different. And and when you realize that, like anybody out there growing their business, you can't grow your business without growing your people. That's it. Because otherwise you'll just be a really awesome army of one. And that's not what you're in this for. Okay. So, none of us is meant to do it on their own. So I think for me, for leadership, it was really about just getting incredibly intentional about who are the right characters, personalities, traits that I need to bring in, because you can teach anybody anything. Okay. And so it really got me focused on who is the best, who brings out my greatness as a leader, and who really gels with which followers gel with how Tracey is as a leader. And I got much more intentional about that.
Interesting. So you've written now a number of books. How many books have you written in total?
10.
Wow, you got me beat. Okay. I'm not going to catch you, not in this lifetime.
Yeah, you will. Are you kidding me?
I think I've said everything I have to say. I don't know. No, I got one more I'm working on, as you know. But let's talk about your latest book, Spark, which we've used as part of our book club. As you know, you did a great 7-week course with some of our leaders with our business, which we appreciate very much. And I know some of my people are independently now working with you on part of your book club. But tell us about Spark a little bit.
Well, Spark, and the other thing why I got a PhD is, again, knowing people like Ken Blanchard and, Henry Cloud, all my favorite authors, they took their dissertation studies and wrote books on them. So Ken Blanchard was all the situational leadership and stuff like that. And so I also, in the back of my mind, knew you would have this very heavy academically robust thing that I have, this book this big, but then you tease that out into be relatable and generalizable to your generic layman. Because what's the point of knowledge if you and I can't understand it and apply it? I think it was Einstein that says, if you can't explain it to a 4-year-old, something like that, you don't understand it well enough. So part of it was, after my dissertation, I thought, okay, this was the crux of Spark. So my dissertation was on self-efficacy, which is motivation. And it's like lightning in a bottle. Why are some people incredibly resilient and other people are incredibly deflated? Some people are like an orchid. They're very beautiful and really cool, but the minute you look at them wrong or you put them in the wrong space, they just die and they're gone. I mean, orchids, if you get it right, but man, it just... And other people are like dandelions, where you have a seed in the middle of the Autobahn and all it gets is heat and carbon dioxide, and yet it grows. So why are some people dandelions and other people are orchids? So that's really what I studied. And so out of that came the book Spark, which was the 5 essentials to ignite the greatness within, because resiliency, adaptive capacity, your ability to regenerate comes from an intrinsic spark. Something has to light off in you where you're like, nope, that stank. But I shall live to fight another day. And so I came up with the 5 tenets, which is singularity, which is why I loved purpose number 2, because it's got to be your singular focus. What is your best and highest purpose to be on this earth? Persistence, which means you're going to have to keep, and you talk a lot about persistence in your book. So that's what I have to bring to the table. I have to bring my vision and my grit. Nobody can do the work for me. And nobody, like my father couldn't have told me, Tracey, I want you to take the company and do this with it. That's not my purpose. That's his purpose for me. And of course, he's in heaven, so nobody can do the work for me. So this is what we bring. So this is what I found in my doctoral study. This is what we bring. But then you need the externals. There's 2 sides of every coin. And A stands for advocates. You're my advocate, John. Your people in your group are my advocate. You need your champions. You need the people that are getting on your podcast, that are having you on their podcast. Your advocates that want your success more than you do. Resources, the tools, the branding, the website, the product knowledge. You got to have the tools to execute the vision. And then knowledge, which is what we're really talking about. You don't know what you don't know. And every day you're going to be faced with new things, and all the answers to everything that we need to figure out is out there. You just got to find it. So that was really the crux of Spark, was as a result of my PhD.
Interesting. And you know, let's talk about something along these same lines. You've worked with a lot of people in a lot of different walks of life. I mean, I've spent most of my career in 2 areas, obviously, you know, network marketing and a little bit in sports. You've touched different industries, different you know, occupations. Okay. But the one thing, if you could comment on this, would you agree with me on the following statement? And if so, elaborate. That all leaders in any of those walks of life, be it military, be it network marketing, be it sales, be it the high tech world that you were in for a while, ministry. Certainly, I know you know a lot of people in the ministry. Would you agree with me? And if so, why? That all leaders in all of those different industries and worlds are readers.
1000%. And here's why. My dad said, you're going to be the same person 5 years from now that you are today, except for 2 things. 2 things. The people you meet and the books you read. Okay. So mental plasticity, the mind, is the greatest gift that we have. And we have the mind of Christ. You must keep developing that. Just like, you know, we exercise our bodies and our muscles. You're a jock. Okay. I love sports. I love working out, but you got to exercise the mind too. And so if you're not constantly learning, number one, at the speed of business that's going on right now, with all the different technologies and all the different regulations and all the different interlocking of society, you are going to be so far behind, you won't even know what hit you. Okay.
Exactly.
Businesses move at the speed of sound right now. And you need to know how to make decisions now based on the speed of sound and the fact that everybody lives in a fishbowl now. So that's part of it, is just, you have to keep up. The other thing is too, the art of regeneration means that every day I should be unlearning something I thought I knew and relearning something new. Okay. So you can't be in leadership. Remember, if you're in leadership, you have to be, and people are like, well, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. And I'm like, well, but you should be the most hungry to be learning and modeling that for other people. Now, I always surround myself with people that are smarter in certain ways than me. Tactical, maybe technical. But if you are a leader, you better be developing your strategic, your future vision. And that comes from reading blogs, trade journals, listening to podcasts, calling up other leaders and saying, hey, what would you recommend, kind of thing. And all this comes from learning, because we just don't know what we don't know. So if you don't, Deming has my favorite quote. He says, learning is not compulsory. Neither is survival. Okay, you will be left in the dust and then some, and you won't even know what hit you. And we have people that rely on us for our livelihood.
Mhm.
We have to be always like, if you would have just let the pandemic slap into you, oh, I didn't see that coming. Well, you should have seen that come. You know, part of being knowledgeable is you're always looking for contingency planning, and you're always thinking about what about the future this, and you're always thinking about different things that oh my gosh, if I lose this stream of revenue, and that takes thought and that takes learning. That's not just intuitively obvious. So I couldn't agree anymore, because and your people need to respect you as a thought leader in your field. And what do we call people? They're the subject matter experts,
Mhm.
not the most charismatic, but to be an SME me. And that's why I wanted my PhD. I want to know, I want to be the one that people turn to and say, Tracey, what do you think about this? And I can go, well, let me tell you. And I couldn't do that if I would not have amassed the knowledge.
Interesting. Interesting. So let me ask you this, in starting to wrap up on this, okay? If I stopped at your house right now, what is Tracey Jones reading this week? Because I know you're always reading something. So what are you reading this week?
You know, it's crazy. So, well, first of all, I'm reading. Okay, I'm going back on this because I talk about this book, Unoffendable by Brian Hansen, especially with what's going on in the world. Which has always been going on in the world. We've always been awful to one another. Okay, it's just more visible. I'm rereading Who Moved My Cheese because I'm working on my next book is a little business parable. So I'm rereading this to get the flow of this.
Yeah.
But I want to show you this too, and you'll like this. I'm working with somebody on another one of our life-changing classics on one of my heroes, Buckminster Fuller.
Ah, okay.
So I'm reading through an anthology, trying to distill the wisdom of Buckminster Fuller into a book like this big. So
Ooh, good luck.
I know I'm really looking for the core tenets and just going through this and just, hey, people, part of the thing of knowledge is we are the curators of wisdom, and we want to introduce all the great, they call them seminal thinkers. If your knowledge has been around for 50 years or longer, you're called a seminal thinker. And so we need to reintroduce the greats that need introduced to the upcoming generations, because everybody needs to know all these incredible people that are out there. So at any given time, and then I have incredible, like two of my friends, okay, one of my sparklers wrote a book and sent it to me, Prevailing Hope, and then Tony Bouquet, he wrote a book. So books, so many good books, so many good books.
There really are. But on that Fuller one, this is interesting. You'll find it interesting, and I think I've shared this with you. Is I think of Fuller in one sense. The Fuller the business guy, Fuller the guy that lived a long time, Fuller the guy that was known in so many different areas and respected. But I never knew his role in the nutrition world, with some of the work that he did with carbon, which is becoming a big area of nutrition. And interestingly enough, Nikolai Tesla, right, who of course Tesla, the car's named for, he also dabbled in the nutrition world for a long time. So it's interesting how some of these people were just so smart in so many different areas that here they are, they're gone, but their work lives on. So
Yes.
you know
Yeah. Well, and you're in a science-based company, so you're always going to be around people that are trying to look for the next great things. And I mean, we're still discovering stuff about our world, the cosmos, our bodies. If we think we know everything, we haven't even scratched the surface of it.
no.
So there's so much more knowledge out there to be acquired. And that's what leadership is about.
So Tracey, let me let you have the last word on this. Okay. A lot of people are going to watch this that are right now maybe economically hurting. They're looking perhaps at our industry, the industry I'm in, network marketing, perhaps for the first time. Perhaps they've been displaced from, a job after many years, no doing of their own, this whole COVID craziness. Or flip side of that is perhaps they're a young person that's looking and saying, hey, looking for something to do with my life. Okay. Now, what's the best place for them to start their self-development program, their reading program? Where did they start? Because that's something's never really been answered. It's kind of, the reason I'm asking the same questions redundantly on all these interviews is we all found a book by accident. Somebody handed us a book, right? We didn't go to the library and go, hey, where's the self-development section? Right? You might after the fact, but initially somebody touched you like we talked about earlier. But
Yeah.
where do they start? Where does that 60-year-old that was in a business that's no longer going to be there for whatever reason, or a job that's no longer going to be there, or that 25-year-old conversely, maybe they have all those internet skills and all that other stuff. They know how to work all these gadgets, but they have no idea how they're ever going to support themselves. Where do they start that most important step of self-development, reading, comprehension, etc.? Where do they begin?
Well, you can always start by Googling the top 25, personal development books of all time. And you're going to have to, I like mixing the old and the new. And in my dissertation, you had to have stuff that was like only 2 years old in research, but then you had to go back to the greats that founded the theory of leadership that you were working on. So I would Google it and say, hey, what are the top 10 leadership, and you're going to get the Think and Grow Rich, See You at the Top, Power of Positive Thinking, How to Win Friends. You're going to get that core 10, probably Life is Tremendous in there. And those are all incredible books. And the other thing is, I would also, if you've got somebody that you think really has it together and you're looking at them and they have it together, they're probably, I bet you're their readers, ask somebody and say, hey, what book changed your life? And then I tell people, and if you get it and you start reading it, it's not doing it for you, you don't have to finish it, because different people are going to be drawn to different types of leadership books. I get some leadership books and people are like, you're going to die when you read this. And I'm like, I can't get past 3 pages. It's just not my thing. Mm-hmm. So I just tell people remain open, and there's so many great leadership blogs, and there are so many people just like them out there now that are all of a sudden realizing personal development and starting to get into it. And they're curating the wisdom. I'd get Jim Rohn, definitely, and Zig, and definitely Greatest Sales, Og Mandino. I mean, they're just classics.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for joining us today. This is Dr. Tracey Jones. This is John Soller, host of the Leave Nothing to Chance podcast. We come to you every single week, and we have another remarkable guest that's going to come up on our next show, and that's Wally Kralik, who started life in the blue jean industry, believe it or not, in Canada, and has another amazing life story that lost everything, rebuilt it through network marketing. So he's going to be our next guest. So Dr. Jones, thank you again today. As always, lots of words of wisdom. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, John. It was an honor to be here.
Thank you. Okay. Let me just figure out
how
to
just
save.
Yep. And then they'll clip it off at the end.